Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for standing by, and welcome to today's presentation, 21st Century Digital Economy. Your host today is Dr. Sinclair Stockman, Executive Director of Digital Northern Ireland 2020. I would now like to turn the conference over to Dr. Stockman.
Hi, everybody. Thanks to those of you who've joined in on time, and thanks for joining the first of these five lunchtime seminars. Hopefully it will do wonders not only for your intellect but also for your diet, certainly for my waistline. I'd like to, before starting off the session, say a particular thank you to Darren Lemon at Eircom, who turned over his virtual ICT week to the Digital Northern Ireland 2020 programme. Darren, along with all of the other operators, major operators in Northern Ireland, is a member of the steering board for the Digital Northern Ireland 2020 programme, and he's given over this week to us so that we can talk about how do we actually get to light up Northern Ireland's digital platform. We've got a fantastic platform. We've got a penetration of 65%. It really should be 90-95% and growing. And we want to talk here about how we make that happen and how we reap the benefits that it can give us. My first challenge will be to make sure I drive this beast. Three quick slides. The first is we have one of the best digital platforms on the planet. And I'm not going to talk about the stats and statistics and so forth of this. I'm quite happy to pick this up with anybody at the end of the session or afterwards. But in terms of penetration of fibre, extension of fibre to the cabinet, extension and the accessibility of fibre to business premises and so forth, and indeed the use of WiMAX to fill all the holes where no other technology could get to, we cover 98, 99%. But we will have covered 98, 99% of the region within the next 12 months. What this programme is about, therefore, is not deploying technology. It's about how we proactively exploit it to get the benefits of that to ourselves, to our businesses, and to the region as a whole. We're in what we think of now as the engagement phase. We want to engage you. We want to engage the people you know. We want to engage the people they know in business and community and society to actually be intolerant about the pace of progress and start to use this to reap benefits for themselves and for their employees. We've set ourselves a target, a vision for Northern Ireland. And I think it's actually a perfectly reasonable vision, that by the end of the decade, we can become the world's preferred destination for digital economy investment. And by that, I don't just mean digital media content and programming. I mean using the digital platform to do whatever we do in business, to do whatever we do in life, to do whatever we do in terms of government, health, education, and so forth, better than anybody else, and be a supplier of that out into the rest of the planet. We're never going to be the biggest. I think the last census had us at 1.79 million. I was working on that last night frantically to work out what percentage of the population actually had access to superfast broadband in terms of numbers of people. So we're never going to be the biggest, but we can be the best. And here's a spin on that. With a population of 1.79 million in a world population of 7 billion, we're not really going to be on the target screens of many marketing directors and sales directors must-have hit list. However, with a global population and global potential market of 7 billion, actually 3.5 to 4 billion of whom are now actively connected onto the internet, we've got a very big market to target at and a very big market to supply our goods into. And the challenge is for us to actually pick that up. So, being clear again, what we're talking about is not the actual wires and so forth. The operators have done that. We're talking about how we extend that access to the point of usage, how we get people to connect, how we get the added features of cloud infrastructure and data centers in place, or what I would prefer to call them web service centers in place, so that we can start to deliver applications out not only to ourselves but to the rest of the world. And then on that top dark blue slide, which you're now looking at, how we use it to make our digital media better, ICT better, leisure industry better, engineering better, health and life sciences better, food and agriculture, our government services, living in the towns we live in, our smart homes, community, education and health. How can we use this really jewel in the crown technology of the 21st century to help this economy buck the trend, make this region buck the trend, and during a period of economic crisis actually be the region which shows the way to success. I can think of no better person to paint that vision than our guest speaker today, Peter Cochrane. Peter and I have known each other for a few years, not many years because that would make us sound old. Peter was one of the first people who really understood and evangelized the power of interaction in the network and the power of interaction in the digital economy. I've learned masses from Peter, and he has probably forgotten more than most people will ever know about the digital platform. It's a real pleasure to have him today and giving up his time to us. And Peter, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinclair. Morning, everybody. I'm actually on the island of Jersey right now, and there are a couple of things I would like to point out to you. First of all, any kind of teleconferencing has limitations. I'm going to do my best to project some enthusiasm and some emotion. The reality is it's about 20 dBs down on what you get face-to-face. So to augment this presentation, if you go onto that website, cochrane.org.uk, at your leisure when we have finished, you'll find on there more presentations, more movies, papers, and blogs. On this particular occasion, I've got some constraints, and I can't show you some of the movies, so I'm going to have to describe a few things. So I'm going to posit with you, as we start, the following. First of all, to talk of a given bandwidth as being some kind of utopia is just plain silly. In my experience, when you get 100 megabits per second both ways, life gets interesting. When you get up to a gigabit both ways, then it really becomes very productive indeed. I am right now in a community that is rolling out that bit rate, and they've got 18 of the world's top banks here, and they're leveraging their network. But I want to go beyond what you know and what you see today and see if we can be a bit more expansive. So let's just have a look at what we know for sure. I like this. It's the Red Queen hypothesis, and it really, to my mind, exemplifies the situation we find ourselves in. I've never seen so many people, so many executives stressed. Managers are finding it difficult to cope. Imagine for one moment that 18 months ago there were no iPods. Now there are 40 million out there. Imagine an artificial intelligence degree put online for free. Within a week, they had 100,000 people sign up, and they're looking now at 1 million people on this free virtual degree course by the end of the year. My forecast is that there's going to be some more debris, and one of the biggest is going to be the education system is going to go the same way as the music industry for the same reasons. And the technology is a challenge. To put you at your ease, I find technology a challenge, and I'm a technologist. And people do not like change instinctively. It's uncomfortable. But in my company, in my life, I purposely force change. So for the first time in my career, I've just gone in a negative direction with my computer. So instead of having a quad core, 1 gig hard drive, and lots of power, I'm now down to a single core and a solid state drive. What I've actually done, excuse me, folks, I've got a bit of a cold, is gone further into the cloud. I'm actually pushing the boundary of the technology, and it's uncomfortable. Machiavelli didn't actually say this, I did. But had he been here, he would have said it. Most companies have a history, and they find it difficult to change. Just one moment. Sorry, excuse me. I'm not going to be able to get shaking to the Sorry, folks, I picked up a terrible cold and I just had an incredible cough. Good examples of companies like this are HP and IBM. HP is killing itself, but IBM managed this magic transformation. Mid-flight, it managed to change itself from something big and lumbering to something much smaller, smarter, and agile. Very difficult to do, but necessary. Let me give you an example. This is where the card companies are thinking, going from a swipe card on the terminal to a swipe card on your mobile phone or on your laptop. That's really not the next step. But we do know that giant leaps are risky. They're exciting, but they're very definitely risky. And yet, people like Apple seem to get it right. The question is, how do they do it? Well, I think it's by really understanding what is available and what it can do now and what it will do in the future. And I mean the technology. And whilst I can predict fairly accurately what technology is going to arrive when, I can tell you for sure, I can't predict how people will react and how they will use it. But if you understand the market, you make the technology easy to use, make it simple, make it obvious, make it convenient, and you solve a problem and satisfy a need, then people will love it. For me, a software training course is a complete anathema. I've never been on one. I don't see the point. If an application or a piece of technology needs me to read a handbook, I go and buy something that doesn't. It ought to be intuitive. Now, we have an interesting population. I'm now seeing 3-year-olds who are able to find themselves onto their games on the web. I'm finding 7 or 8-year-olds who have never connected a computer to a piece of wire other than for power. And they move around online by wireless all the time, and for them that is the norm. At the same time, we've got a really old grey population, and if they choose, they can get up to the line and they can use the technology. So here, timing has to be spot on. And the big future opportunity occurs as the world of atoms and bits comes together. We have actually created now a world of instant gratification, and the physical delivery of atoms is key. But I'm going to predict for you that we're going to stop shipping atoms, physical goods. We're going to start shipping designs, because the manufacturing industry is going to go from being concentrated to being dispersed. And in a moment, I'm going to show you how. So let's have a look at a very inefficient industry. Quite typically, across Europe, the UK, North America, the truck fill average is around 17 to 22%. There is no load consolidation. There is no both-way loading. There is no instantaneous grab a truck as it goes by. Why is that? Because the whole system is run on a Dickensian basis, and it is not using the technology that's available. The same is true of this sector with containers. The first thing you know about your container not being delivered is when it's not there on the day promised. And yet we have the technology to track trucks, containers, and everything else. We want to know where our package is, when it will arrive. We want to know that it's in good condition. And it doesn't matter how it's being delivered. We need to know in a modern world where it is. So the transition is going from barcodes to RFID tags and intelligent tagging that also has GPS on it. Now, there are other reasons for doing this, and it's really to do with the cradle-to-grave cycle of materials and things that we manufacture and their reuse. So let's just look for a moment at another side of the coin, literally trading and transaction. We've gradually slid over from atoms to bits. We've now got people in Korea with their mobile phones for nearly 10 years now have not had any credit cards whatsoever. And the reason is it's all done on the mobile phone. The only reason you would have a credit card in Korea is you travel abroad. Most of Africa is doing payments by mobile phone and micro-transitions, and yet in the developed world, it's held up as a new concept. And the whole thing is becoming virtualized. Who is preventing the first world from using this technology? Dare I say it, the jumbo jet of the card industry and banking. They're resisting. They want to continue. So they want to take a card and change it from swipe to wave. That's not the problem. This is the problem. If I go and buy a coffee now, I get a card. I get a loyalty card. Every airline, I get a card. Every hotel, I get a card. For every account I've got at least 2 cards. Even my car has a card. Now, the big opportunity is for someone to manage my cards onto my mobile phone. That would make so much more sense and make my life so much easier. Now, there's another reason for doing this, and I have to apologize that the animation that goes with this isn't included. But ask yourself what your mobile phone knows about you. It knows where you've been, where you're going to. It knows where you are right now. It knows who you've met, who you're meeting, and who you're going to meet. It knows who you call, who calls you, who you text, who you email. But there's a lot of other information in there because I can see when you're walking, sitting, riding on a train or in a car. I can see you stop at traffic lights and I can see you go around a traffic island. How? The accelerometer that's in that device, that allows you to tilt it, also gives information about your movement. The next generation of mobile phones are going to have even more sensors on there, and a lot of them will be pertinent to your health. So this is becoming effectively the center of life. So from a business perspective, I'm going to suggest to you that the money really is in the metadata as opposed to being in the data itself. I'll expand on that a little further. But we have to ask, what are the people, what are the skills, and where should the CIO and CTO be looking? Well, the online generation think differently. Their experience is entirely different. But all too often, when they join a company, this is what happens to them. They're caged up. They can't have a personal computer. They have to have a company computer. They can't get any bandwidth. They're not allowed on social networking. They can't use the websites that they need. The most advanced companies on the planet are letting people buy their own computers. They're letting them organize their own access, and they're paying them up to £2,500 a year not to talk to the IT department. So another prediction for you, IT departments are going to go the same way as the typing pool for the same reasons. We've got to stop these youngsters asking this question. They do not see a world where home and office are different, or being in a coffee shop is different. They see a world where they work anywhere. To my mind, these are the most connected, networked, and participative human beings that we have ever seen. We should not be stunting their capability. They get a really bad rap in the media, and they may not be able to do mental arithmetic or spell so brilliantly, but believe me, they have got an awful lot of innovation to give. So here is a big mindset change for companies. IT is personal, like socks and underwear, nothing to do with the company. Let the people buy their own. Let them find their own applications and get rid of all the constraints, and you will be amazed at how creative your workforce can be. In all the companies that I fund and I manage, we are not allowing anybody to set up an IT department. It is all outsourced. I think this is the way it looks. The conventional tech thinkers, the older people, see their company activity like this. In the new companies, it's the other way around. Much, much more innovation. And it's to do with freedom. And if you visit Google or any of the companies like Facebook, you will see huge amounts of innovation just let loose. So another view of this is that creativity has actually moved to the edge. It's not by accident that all the telcos have closed down their R&D. It's not by accident that as we decode the genome, as we decode the protein stack, as we get a body model of a human being, we will see all of the pharmaceutical companies close down their R&D as well. Just excuse me for one moment, please. I can't help it. Sorry. Apologies, folks. I'm really suffering this morning. It's about killing me. Here we go. We have to look at new resources and compatibility, and this includes the use of machines in a way that we've not partnered with them before. You may or may not be aware that that mobile phone that you own, that laptop that you're using, the chips weren't designed by a human being, they were designed by a computer. We have operations like NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who are now using machines as innovative thinkers. All the electronic inventions of the 20th century have now been surpassed by machine invention, and a lot of the things that they've created, we don't actually understand how they work. So really the world is about information and wisdom. These are the crown jewels, and how we get them is up for grabs. So Tim Berners-Lee has a very interesting view, and that is cloud computing is the way the web should have been in the first place. And this is my view of why IT is such a waste. This is what we do inside companies and waste valuable resource. If we outsource it, we can do so much more. It really is the job of all of us inside our companies to be more creative and generate change. Now, another way of looking at the cloud is being industrialized. It's a production line. It is just a service that we take for granted. We don't generate our own electricity. We don't provide our own water. We don't do any waste disposal. We outsource it. So what are the impeders of progress and innovation? Well, there's always we've always done it this way brigade, the old people. The investment in the old plant and equipment, the bean counters with their incredible short-termism, and then the destructive capability of investors. We have to overcome all of that with a vision that is right for our society. So There is now another dimension to all of this. We, as a species, are destroying the planet. Our technology invokes irreversible change, and we're seeing the wholesale destruction of materials. We have to change to new technologies that are sustainable, and we have to go from food to waste cycles to food to waste to food. This is a good example. The tree grows, leaves fall, the leaves rot, they're attacked by microbes and fungi, and they become food for the tree again. It's possible to do that, but it's only possible if we concentrate a lot of industrial power at this point. The intersection of nano, bio, and ITC is where the action is for this coming century. Just a few months ago, I picked up an atom and moved it from one place to another. I never thought that I would do that in my lifetime. And this presents a different way of thinking about materials. Everything that you're looking at and using, this conference call over optical fiber is dependent on absolutely phenomenal purity of materials. And that purity can be achieved and enhanced by nanotechnology. But what intrigues me is that the gap between biotech and nanotech is closing real fast. And we are learning from biotech by decoding what Mother Nature does, and we're building that into our processors and our machines, but then we're turning them back into controlling biological forms. And if I could run a movie, you would see some mutating matter down there. On another dimension, we can now print 3D objects that are very complex, like abstract things like a mathematical surface or an impeller for a pump, or indeed a complete gearbox. Now, the price for these printers, if you buy an amateur one, about $700. The cheapest professional one is about $13,000, and a really top-end one is about $60,000. Last year, the first printed car was produced, the first printed bicycle, and now we have manufacturers in the advanced sector of technology routinely printing goods. So you have to think about that $300 printer in your office being replaced by a 3D version. Beyond that, if you look at this gentleman at the bottom, he's got an ear growing on his arm. Excuse me, folks, I'm just going to have to cough. I do beg your pardon, but I'm afraid I've got a dose of something that's killing me this morning. If you look at that mouse, he's also got an ear. Now, the way this is done is to exploit stem cells in a small area. And the great thing is that we can now grow body organs from our own tissue. The peculiar thing about this is we don't actually know how it works, but that does not preclude us from using it. And there is now an interesting mesh of the nano and the bio to create new materials for batteries, for clothing, for structures, such as the casing of machines, automobiles, and the auto industry now is looking at aspects like the body shell of a car being the battery, self-healing body shells, so that if you have a a dent put in the side of your car, it will reshape itself and resurface itself automatically. Now, these are just dreams right now, but not such wild dreams. They're not very far off. This is an interesting robot. You'll find it on another of my presentations on my homepage. But we're now building very small robots with genetic information, with communication that looks pretty much like the protein communication, that are doing things that are emulating nature. This lab on a chip is probably going to be one of the most evocative technologies of this century. We have in the laboratory sensors that can now detect a single molecule of a substance. So imagine you go to the doctor's office, he takes a swab because you're ill, sends it away, and 2 weeks later you get the result. Contrast that to going to the doctor's office, he gets a lab on a chip, and 10 minutes later he can tell you what's wrong with you. It cost about $30 million in 13 years to decode the human genome. We can now decode it for less than $1,000 in half a day. And within 5 years, we're looking at $100 in an hour. And really, 5 years after that, we're looking at being able to decode the human genome for about $10 in 10 minutes. Now, that is not a dream. It's an engineering problem, and we can see how to do it. That has serious implications for healthcare and insurance and a lot of other things. So where does all of this lead? As everybody and everything becomes networked, we're going to see new information, new intelligences, and new ways of doing things on a scale that's hard to imagine. This is the reaction of most people. But I would point you in the direction, say, of Garry Kasparov being beaten by Deep Blue. I would point you in the direction of IBM Watson, who is now the Jeopardy champion of the world. And people will say, well, they're just machines running algorithms. But hey, so are we. I went to school with young people who could remember everything. I couldn't, but they couldn't solve problems. And indeed, Watson can't solve problems, but it's now being employed in the medical industry because it can provide a better diagnosis for human ailment than a human doctor. So this is quite an incredible change. And I'm going to suggest to you that in business, one of the biggest challenges that we face is the fact that the processes that we're now engaged in do not include 3 or 4 variables or dimensions, but hundreds. And that is way beyond the capability of a human being. And so our challenge is to get information engines that will analyze the situation, give us a prognosis, and guide us to a good decision. One interesting example of this technology is in the back office, Google are creating a truth engine. So can you imagine some politician gets up and says something, and within 30 seconds, you can, from Google, have a response. Is he telling the truth or not? Might change the face of the way the country is managed. So unfortunately, I can't show you this, but again, it's on my homepage. But this is a planetary walker that has been designed by a machine. No human involvement, but now human beings are actually building these and being guided by the artificial intelligence concerned. All of these early 20th century inventions have been overtaken by machines that have come to the same conclusion and then got enhance the approach to an even better result. The reason they win, and we have difficulty understanding, is that all of what you see on there from human beings is linear. Everything that you see from machines tends to be nonlinear, and we do not understand that area very well. In fact, we don't understand it at all. So the question is, do we have a modern infrastructure to be a player in this new world? And I don't think we do. If I look at the road system, it's difficult to move things around. Airports are overcrowded, railways overcrowded, and the speed of the infrastructure is way below what is required. So how come? I don't think there is a soup to nuts view. There's not an overall view. I don't think people are now capable of looking at more than one issue at a time very often. And I look at it like this. We somehow seem to have finished up with a brutal tax regime, with political system that really doesn't understand too much, and a culture that celebrates mediocrity. We have to change all of this. For example, if I go to Canada and I want to start a company, I get 10 years tax-free. If I go to parts of the United States, they give me a building for free. As soon as I start a new company in the UK, the taxman wants some money. And there are other roadblocks to success. The UK has a famine of really good management teams in terms of starting new companies. It's very difficult to do, but new technologies will almost certainly demand new companies. The interesting fact is we create and start more new companies per capita year than most nations, including the USA. But the failure rate is huge, more than 5 times that of the US. How come? First of all, the banking system can't deliver what is required. The venture capital community are a bit of a nightmare. They're more interested in protecting themselves than ensuring your company will succeed. And you can waste a lot of your life kissing frogs. I look at it like this. The rest of the world is not standing still. I don't listen too much to the politicians who declare that we're leading the world, because we're not. We're a little bit on the back foot. If we're going to get with the rest of the world at the leading edge of technology, we have to invest in several dimensions. 1, in technology, 2, in the education of our people, and 3, in the creation of infrastructure. There's a huge amount of global competition now. It really is a beauty competition, no doubt about that. And the infrastructure problems of any nation can be crippling. So that's my overview. I would encourage you to go to my homepage, cochrane.org.uk, and have a look at the presentations, the movies, the papers, and the blogs, and it will give you a much wider perspective. And finally, I'd just like to apologize for coughing, but it was either get on with this presentation or cancel it, and it seemed a better thing to actually do it. Thank you.
And Dr. Stockman, are you there?
Let's try this. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
That's why I've just spent the last 2 minutes talking to myself in an erudite way. Stunning. I'll try to get. Yeah, Peter, thank you. Thank you for breaking through the cough barrier and managed to keep us spellbound. As I said in a bit, you didn't hear that I only ever have an audience spellbound when I open my mouth for the first time. But I noticed in the numbers that you've kept everybody online and listening. I think one of the things which strikes me and what you said, Peter, and I think it actually is something we hear in Northern Ireland, the UK as a whole, maybe indeed in Europe, need to get a grip on, is we waste an awful lot of time thinking we can predict the future and producing 100-page, 200-page, 300-page strategy proposals and studies, laying out what the future is going to look like in the next 20 years. I have yet in our world of communications and IT to find anybody who's correctly predicted the future in terms of how people would use it. Now, nobody in the mobile industry predicted that mobile phones would be used by teenagers to date each other, and that would lead to the explosion in usage. But the people who really succeeded are those people who were prepared to exploit the unexpected when it arrived. They kind of understand things. They're prepared to take a leadership position. They're prepared to take a risk. Would you agree with that?
Yes. A friend of mine, Alan Kay, an ex-Apple guy, made a statement once many years ago, the best way to predict the future is to build it. And what we actually need is a very healthy environment where failure is not a social blight, but a learning experience. And one of the great things about the US is if you fail at something, it's seen as a badge of honor, in actual fact. You had a go, you failed, have another go. Because each time you learn something more. My motto is, if you're going to fail, fail fast. That when you look at where the success is coming from, everybody can see Facebook, and everybody can see Google, and everybody can see Amazon. What they don't see is the thousands of Facebooks that failed. Zuckerberg wasn't the only guy doing this stuff. And you just have to accept the fact that success is now dependent on so many things. The chances of you getting it right is pretty slim. But if you have a healthy startup sector, you can be assured of playing the game. I was with the European Commission last week, and they asked me what I thought of the R&D investment program, and I've been a part of choosing the subjects and allocating money for a few years, and I said, not very much. And they said, why not? I said, well, it hasn't produced anything at all useful. Billions have been spent, and nothing actually useful is produced because about 80% of the time and energy is lost in bureaucracy. And the one thing that has come out, which is Skype, has actually been sold to America. Now, this seems to me to be a European tragedy. The Americans are getting far more success per dollar than we are per euro. And we need to change the industrial environment from one that goes back to the Industrial Revolution to a new revolution that's going to be based on material technologies with lots of small companies trying to create things and one or two succeeding now and again.
Peter, if I take us then, say, into the sort of in Northern Ireland here, or here and now where we are, where we've got ourselves in the comms platform. We've got a fairly solid communications platform there now, and a growing one, one. And in this world that this vision that once created, it's a world of nearly infinite possibilities. What would you say? Because I see a question in here from Mark. What would you say are the opportunities for Northern Ireland in the years ahead? And what do you think we should focus on? And how do we make sure we exploit this piece of glass we have in the ground as much as possible to leverage ourselves up? What would your thoughts be?
I've spent quite a bit of time in Northern Ireland. There's some very interesting problems. I mean, it's a bit different to other places in the UK. But I think leveraging the entire population, you've got some good universities, you create great students, you've got some highly qualified people, and you've got some good facilities. Now, you've got to get the best out of those. But also, you've got a working population that is struggling to get into work every day. You've also got a female population that is grossly underused. because they can't fit into the 9-to-5 office routine. The infrastructure should allow you, improvement should allow you to have far more home workers. And just let me give you a perspective. I've been advising a security company on the Schiphol campus for the last 8 years. We've just put up a new building. We have 60% seating. There are no offices. There is no telephone system. There are no wired connections to the LAN. Everybody buys their own laptop, and everybody's got a PBX app on their laptop and their mobile phone, and they work in groups. Now, the thing is that this operation is changing rapidly, so you'll find a group of 10 people who will work in a corner for a month and then disband. So the whole thing is a bit like a jellyfish organization. And I look at the future of society, and I see that becoming sort of the predominant mode of the creative industries, the places where the money will be generated. Now, if we come back from those creative people, you need the supportive infrastructure. And one of the pieces of research I'm doing at the moment is how much bureaucracy do you need to kill an organism? So I think in terms of countries like France and Italy, where government employees have breached the 50% mark, the economy stagnates and they do a nosedive. If you look at the UK, we've just seen that number get up to 45, and the new government is trying to reduce it. Well, they seem, to my mind, to have lost the context. Industry, innovation, and creative people are not there to fund government. Government are there to help them win. And we've got to invoke that kind of mindset change. I think Northern Ireland is in a great position to do a lot of things. It's well connected with optical fibre to the mainland as well as North America. It's got a compact piece of ground, if you like, so it's very easy to put the infrastructure in, relatively speaking. And you've got a great workforce.
So I think what I think you're saying there, Peter, which is the key thing in this, is exploit the technology and the infrastructure to give us flexibility, allow people to be flexible, encourage them to be flexible, encourage them to fail, and also develop a healthy appetite for ambition and aspiration.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I get involved in a lot of startups. The vast majority of them fail. And interestingly, they don't fail because it's a bad idea. They don't fail because it's bad technology. They tend to fail because they can't get enough money at the right time, can't get funded. And there's also the no-risk culture of the UK, where people won't buy something new or try something new. The Americans always buy something new, and then if it doesn't work, they take you to court later, whereas in Europe, they'll think about it a long while and not really spend a lot of money. That's a very challenging environment to be in. So, to my mind, starting a business, I immediately look at the global market rather than the UK market. I think to start a company that is as parochial as the UK is almost like the kiss of death. You've now got to think in terms of immediately being a worldwide, a global entity. And I think there's quite an appetite for doing it. The number of youngsters that contact me asking for advice is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's interesting because in Northern Ireland we've got I just posted the blog earlier on today. We've got a strange dichotomy. On the one hand, we've got this super infrastructure, but on the other hand, we've got a relatively low uptake in the part of businesses, and certainly a very low uptake in terms of using it interactively. All that said, there are some examples in really areas where you would never have expected to have businesses who, having grasped the idea, much in the same way as sort of Dell did for Michael Dell, for Dell Computers, that if you use this technology correctly, you change the business model, you turn it on its head, and you end up addressing a market and selling things which you didn't know that you were able to make in the first place. They have succeeded and grown and grown and grown. And I sometimes think that again, I think what you're saying in some ways is the technology and the future not only allows you to, but demands that you break that mold.
Absolutely. Yeah? If you don't, you're going to be struggling. Let me give a slightly different positive spin on this by just doing a global view for a moment. I spent part of this year out in Southeast Asia. My brother teaches out in Southeast Asia, and he has a photograph of David Beckham about to take a penalty. And he says, none of you are going to be David Beckham. And the reason is, you can see the opportunity of scoring a goal, but the risk of losing face by missing is so great that you're not going to even try. So the workshop of the world is way down on innovation for the reason that loss of face is a big deal. They work entirely different. If you come back to India and parts of China, we have a very interesting situation. The Americans do not understand that when we had the dot-com bust and they gave all the Indian and Chinese workers pink slips, they all went home, and that is what has powered China and India into the world today. They effectively trained all of these people in America, and they went home and started their own companies. But there are terrific social, religious, and political limitations on their innovative abilities. If you go to the United States, they got a great environment, but a lot of the companies are being driven into the ground by the short-termism of the 3 monthly demands of the markets. Now, when I do anything, I look at what everybody else is doing. I look at where their constraints are. I look at what my position is, and I try not to do me too. I go for the holes. I go for the spaces where they're not working, where I might be able to do something entirely different. There is another positive step. The Americans generally have got an awful lot of money. And I've always contended that in the UK, the lack of money has actually made us ultra creative. You know, if you've got to do something and you've not got all the resources that you need, you tend to come up with solutions that are entirely different. Makes you think differently. So I am not at all negative or downbeat about the prospects for Northern Ireland or the UK in general, because the problems that we have are fairly universal in terms of the constraints. America, you can go to Silicon Valley and connectivity can be a problem. You can go to other places and it can be pretty good. The real shame is that Korea and Japan got on with fibering up their populations in the early 90s. We were going to do that. We'd actually built factories to do it, and then the Thatcher government stopped it because they wanted the cable companies in. But it is not a lot of money to put in the fiber infrastructure and get it going, but we may have to change our attitude. And the attitude can be, where do we invest in fiber to get the biggest return as early as possible for the nation, as opposed to, if we can't give it to everybody, then nobody's having it, which tends to be a sort of political view.
But I think, so, Peter, what you're saying, from what I hear, is actually would have been good advice to the Ulster rugby team on Friday night. Go for the spaces. Don't go if you want to break the mold. Don't go to where people have already been. Go for the spaces. Have a supportive investment infrastructure in place to help you get there. Well, I suppose one of the we have in Northern Ireland, the work that's done the Science Park and some of the other activities has started to create some space there, and indeed we're seeing some of the benefits of that. I think there is a challenge which we have to face up to, is to have belief in our own capabilities and go for the big game. There are a number of companies here who are really top leaders in their field. I think when you say in terms of the of fibre, and that fibre given that advantage, one of the characteristics I think we have in Northern Ireland is that as a mixed urban-rural environment in a relatively small space with a mix of technologies, you can really do business anywhere in the north that you choose to, with anywhere in the rest of the world. All we have to be is really good at what we want to try to sell. There's one very specific question here I've got from Barry McWhinney. I don't know if you see it. Do you see a future for QR codes in the quick request codes in the UK? Quick reference.
I don't see why not. I think they're applicable everywhere. Can I just give you another slant? It goes like this. We've seen open software. We've now got open networks. The next phase is open hardware. So here's an exemplar of what this means, and you now have to apply this to every single sector. So a young man in America buys a $700 3D printer. He takes it home and he finds it unsatisfactory. So he redesigns a chunk of it, manufactures the replacement parts using the printer, fits them, and improves the performance. He then emails his design to every other person that has got one of these printers. Now that's a very interesting regenerative cycle. Another one is the fall in the cost of electronic equipment, laboratory equipment, now sees a lot of fundamental research on biotech being done on the kitchen table. And I'm not kidding. In the way that people of my age were building radios and television sets and amplifiers and stuff in the 60s on the kitchen table, the new generation are playing with the genome on the kitchen table. Now, you've got a mass of this stuff happening. Yeah. That creativity will bubble something up that is quite remarkable. So as I go around, I see some quite remarkable technologies. The big problem is trying to communicate to the banking community, the political community, and the business community the implications of this stuff, and then getting it adequately supported and getting it to the market. So that's my exemplar. I just see this feedback mechanism bubbling away and almost being abstract because people are not understanding it. By the way, I'd like to direct the audience to TEDx Brussels. I was at TEDx Brussels last week, and I gave a presentation on artificial intelligence. It'd be good for you to see that. One, I'm not coughing. Two, it is my voice. Three, it will stretch your mind. The whole presentation is 8 minutes. So if you just search TEDx, that's TEDx Brussels, and then look for me on the page, you'll get our presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter, and thanks very much indeed again for your time. I think just sum up in your last thoughts there. there is most definitely the opportunity for us to say, well, why, if Northern Ireland in this year, nearly the year of the Titanic, and the many other innovations which we were responsible for here, why can we not have the aspiration to be one of the radical thinkers and delivering into a global economy with the help of the platform? And as you say, when you do the design and then you deliver it in people's printers, it sure as hell takes the cost out of the logistics and distribution of what it is making. And that opens up the world to us. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I hope to have all of you and many of your friends in on the session tomorrow. Thanks, and thanks very much indeed for the session. Thank you, Peter, very much. I hope it gets better.
Thank you. Yeah, so do I. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, we can close down now.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude today's presentation. We would like to thank you once again for your time today, and you may now disconnect.